chapter 1. Not too much of a preaching evening tonight, although I'll find my rabbit to chase it, shoot it. John chapter 1. This will be a continuation, next one, of looking at the apostles one by one. And we looked last time at Nathaniel, who most people believe is Bartholomew. We looked at him in the Gospel of John because there's only 7 verses, I think there is, here at the end of the Gospel of John, chapter 1. That's all that says anything about Nathaniel. There's nothing written about Bartholomew outside of that. And so we made comments about that last time. Well, tonight we're going to look at the other guy, the other man who was connected with him, and that's Philip. So Philip is also, he's in the lists in Matthew, Mark, Luke, and he's over in Acts chapter 1. But Philip also, there's nothing written about him outside of the Gospel of John. So if you get the picture, Brother John, Gospel of John God, how do you want to say it? God gave him a lot of material, entrusted that material to him to write. And much of what we know is because of the Gospel of John. Of course, the world hates John because he's different. He doesn't agree with the other ones, and he adds extra information, it's dumb. Dumb that people hate him and think that he's got to be in line with the other guys. Anyone ever done any investigation into court case testimonies where either police officers out on the street or court case testimonies where they get different witnesses that come in and speak, that there's 2 things that they hate to hear. They know that people are not being very truthful, and that's number 1, if you get multiple testimonies that come in, they all say the exact same thing. You all know if 2 or 3 or 4 people say the exact same thing, we'll say 4, then you know that they had gotten ahead together before time and had agreed upon what their story was, and that's the story that they told. So that's called collusion. And obviously, we don't have that in the Bible, do we? Because we have 4 people with 4 different things to say. Well, then, of course, the other thing would be is if there's contradictions in the stories, and we don't have that in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John either. Okay, we don't have contradictions, even though some claim there are. It's clear to see that they're not contradictions. So what we have are 4 different people saying 4 different things, and you know what I hate to read is I hate to read people talk about the Bible as if the Bible was written by man. Because they'll say, well, this person was more interested in this, and this person clearly had some more thoughts about politics than the other, because he wrote more about it like that. And that might have been the case, but everybody who talks like that never mentions how the author of the Bible was not a man. Man penned it, and clearly there's some different personalities inside of it, but you're ignoring the overall reaching effect of God. God's the one who put this thing together. Okay, every man here, I like to think that we all have, because we were originally made in God's image, I like to think that we all have our own unique personalities, are at least in part an extension of who God is. God created man originally in his own image, and he created him to be fruitful and to multiply. And if man never fell, then would there not still be many different types of personalities and individuals? I think so. So yes, there are different personalities around in here, but the author of the Bible is divine, it's God. And so here we have in John chapter 1, we have Philip, and he appears around down here in verse 43. And a lot of this is going to be a little bit of overlap from the previous lessons that we've done, but that's okay. John chapter 1, verse 43, the day following, Jesus would go forth into Galilee, and he findeth Philip, and saith unto him, Follow me. Philip was of Bethsaida, the city of Andrew and Peter. Presumably they'd know each other, I don't know. But there's something special about that city, isn't there? You got 3 men that come out of that, and maybe even 4, Nathaniel. They all come out of this pocket. There must have been a pocket. You know, if they were friends or if they were colleagues, then you help each other by talking about the Lord. You can help each other by having good friends that talk about the Lord. And when one person gets saved in a group and he's got other good friends that want to just serve the Lord together, then that love for the Lord, it spreads to the people right next to you. And that's a wonderful thing when you have a friend that you can share your excitement with the Lord with. God gave me somebody like that when I was a teenager. I had a friend that I shared my love for the Lord with. And we would just be talking Bible all day every time we got around each other. And then of course, this my friend's dad was exciting about the Bible. And he shared his excitement. So you might think something like that was going on here with Bethsaida, that there was these young men that they were excited about serving the Lord. And so when God showed them truth, it wasn't just one person that got saved. It was a pocket of them that got saved and that came and followed Jesus Christ. So we have Philip, that is one of these. And before we get more into him, Philip, the word Philip, the name Philip, means, anyone know what Philip means? Lover of horses. I heard somebody say that because of the context, I don't know, maybe there wasn't much in the way of horses weren't pets like we have them, like Americans have pets. Maybe they were war horses, right? So lover of horses would be more about loving the military might that you have. It could be, I don't know. But the name is not Hebrew, is it? Can anyone think of a historical Philip outside of the Bible, outside of the context of the Bible? You got to know a little bit of history. I don't know that I would have pulled this off, just top of my head. But Alexander the Great, what was his father's name? You can guess, it was Philip. Alexander the Great. His father's, so Macedonia, Greece. His father's name was Philip. That was Philip II. And then 3 more Philips later would have been Philip V. And Philip V was the one who surrendered Macedonia to Roman control, transitioned from the Greeks to the Romans. And so the name Philip was Greek. And so Philip here, there's no way you can say he was Greek, because God's not choosing a Greek man for one of his 12 apostles, but he had a Greek name. And you say, well, some people would say, well, that's just not going to happen. See, my name, last name is German, but I'm not German, right? He's Polish last name. Are you Polish? I mean, not really. Your history is, right? You're more German, and there it is. But your name's not German, is it? No. I think Heaton's in English, right? Is that English name? But Paul, that's not English, right? That's Hebrew. Dan, that's not English, right? That's Hebrew as well, right? So it's maybe a little less common in certain places, but it's not uncommon. So Philip had a Greek name. That's important a little bit later, because maybe there was more to it than that, as we'll see in one of these cases we'll look at. But in the Bible, there's at least 3. There might be 4 Philips, but there's this Philip who's the apostle. We look over here in Acts chapter 6. You see the other Philip, who turned to be one of the deacons, one of the servants of the church. And of course, he served Philip the apostle. Acts chapter 6, verse 5, we see in here there's a Philip. And of course, this Philip, we think it's the same person, probably the same person, wouldn't guess why he's not, who turned out to be the evangelist later on in Acts chapter 21, did he have 4 daughters that prophesied? Does that sound right? Or did he have, 4 daughters, 6 daughters? I don't remember. 4. He had 4 daughters that prophesied in Acts chapter 21. So that's a second Philip. Your third Philip, anybody want to throw it out to me who another Philip is in the Bible? He had a wife, Herodias. The Tetrarch, that's possibly another one. I'm not sure. I read that it's a different one. The Tetrarch is in Luke chapter 3. Luke chapter 3 is another Philip. And he's one of the Tetrarch, or he rules 1/4 of the country. You have different tetrarchs here in Luke chapter 3, but it says that there's Tiberius, Pontius Pilate, governor of Judah, Herod, Tetrarch of Galilee, and his brother, Philip, Tetrarch of Iturea, and of the region of Trachonius, and Lysanias, the Tetrarch of Abilene. Now, I read, somebody said that that's a different Philip. It's a half-brother of the other Philip who had the wife of Herodias. So that's all, who knows? That's all up, and it's not important to what scriptures have to say about it. But there's at least 3, possibly 4, Philips in the Bible. Now, I read a book talking a little bit about Philip, and he's not liked. It says this guy who talked about Philip said that he was they call him the apostle who was slow-witted. I thought, I don't understand that. You're going to get that from what? Because he said some questionable things, or he questioned God a couple times. But he said he was slow-witted, he was dull, a guide who could not lead, a disciple who lacked spiritual insight. I'm not going to go that far. But what I see is this. Let's look at the Bible. Okay, we see here in John chapter 1, there's not much here that we've talked to outside of what we've already said. But he gets off to a really good start, because the first thing that Philip does when Jesus comes to him personally and calls him, the first thing that Philip does is right on verse 45, is the same thing that Andrew did. Andrew went first and he found his brother Simon Peter. What does Philip do as soon as he gets called to follow Jesus Christ? It's just so much that he's got to share it. And so he finds presumably a good friend of his, Nathanael, and he gets Nathanael and he invites him. He says, "We have found him, of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." You see, Philip had a love for the Bible. He loved the Old Testament. He knew something about the Scriptures to where he was looking for Jesus Christ. So that when Jesus appeared, Philip looked at him and said, "This is it. We've found him." And that's just having that heart that wants to search for the Lord. Okay, that's having a heart that's searching for God, looking for him, interested in him. Some people are interested in truth. Some people aren't. Right? That deals a lot with your spirit, soul, and body about what your purpose and intentions are. But Philip, he was in love with the Bible, and so when Jesus Christ showed, he transferred that love to this man. He says, "We have found him, whom Moses in the law and in the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." So this is a great start for Philip. This is going to be a good sign for what following Jesus Christ means. It means telling others about Jesus Christ. That's what these early apostles did. One apostle found another, and they became followers of Christ. And then these 12 men ended up creating the church, or sharing the gospel to such a degree that thousands of people got saved. And it started this movement that was unstoppable. As Jesus said, "Greater things than these shall ye do." And Philip was one of them that did it. The first thing he did is he found his brother, he found his friend, found his companion, and he said, "Well, you need to follow Jesus Christ." We found him. So that's introduction to him. John chapter 6 is the second time we see Philip. John chapter 6. And this is after having been around Jesus Christ for a little bit of time, and we're back to the feeding of the 5,000, and you will see that Philip's role in this. And you'll see this. We'll see two things here. He kind of showed a little bit of doubt, or not understanding. I presume probably it's because of this that this one man wrote this thing about him being slow-witted and dull. But I think the Bible says none of the apostles understood, none of the disciples understood who Jesus was until after his resurrection. So I don't know why we're picking on Philip. However, Jesus called him out. Jesus called him out in John chapter 6, verse 5, when Jesus lifted up his eyes and saw a great company come unto him. He saith unto Philip, "Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat?" Now he didn't direct it to the whole group. He specifically picked out Philip. Why? I don't know. But he specifically picked out Philip and said, "Whence shall we buy bread that these may eat?" And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Jesus knows what's going on, knows what the plan is, knows what the problem is, and who knows, maybe Philip was talking behind his back, saying, you just know Jesus is going to ask us to feed this group of people. I don't know what's going on here, but something about Philip, Jesus picked him out, and maybe he just knew how Philip was going to answer, and this was the answer that he wanted. In verse 7, Philip answered, 200 penny worth of bread is not sufficient for them. So remember, a penny is what you would have made in a wages time for a laborer. Okay? Maybe you'd say a laborer today would be, what, $15, $20 an hour maybe? I mean, minimum wage is going to go up to $15 here in Michigan next year in January. It's crazy. So $15, $20 an hour would maybe be a laborer's wage. Well, how much bread can you buy with $20? Can you buy a week's worth of bread for $20? I mean, let's not talk about that cheap, mushy bread. It's junk. But like bakery bread, would that be like $6, $7 for a loaf? I know for my family that's like gone in a day, right? But for one person, I mean, that's presumably enough for a week. So maybe $20 worth, one day's worth of wages would be, I mean, that's enough for like a month. So 200 penny worth would be 200 months worth of bread, and he's saying 200 months worth of bread, let's say 4 loaves, 1 loaf a week, 4 loaves for so that'd be 800 loaves of bread, he's saying is not enough. So, I mean, that seems pretty accurate, doesn't it, for 5,000 people? 5,000 people eating, maybe you'd have 4 or 5 people share 1 loaf of bread. So if you have 5,000, that means you need about, 1,000 loaves of bread, and there's only like 800. I mean, that might even be close if you think about it. I don't know. But Philip is saying 200 penny worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. So what's Philip doing here? This is kind of a little bit of a mark on his character with this, but not any worse than you or I might have, and not any worse than any of the other disciples would have. But what Philip is doing is he's looking at what's not there. He's looking at how impossible it is. And you compare that against Andrew, the next guy, down in verse 8, which we talked about him before when we talked about Andrew. But Andrew's comment, and maybe Andrew wasn't even asked. Andrew just volunteered it because he's listening to Philip just talk negative. Well, when you're hearing only this depressive, negative attitude, sometimes you want to speak up and say, hey, dummy, it's not that bad, you know. So maybe Andrew here is doing that, or one of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, say, but there is a lad here that hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes. Right? So Philip is, man, we couldn't even if we had a 400 penny worth of bread, or 200 penny worth of bread, that wouldn't even be enough for everyone to have just a little. He's like, it's impossible. What we don't have. He's focusing on the insufficiency. He's focusing on what wasn't there. And Andrew was like, well, I mean, we got something, but the end result is the same. Even Andrew was just like, what are they among so many? So Andrew was saying we have this, but it's not enough for everybody. Philip is saying he's looking at the big problem, and he's like, well, there's no way we could take care of it. And so you see the problem here is that Philip, looking at the big problem, how is Philip going to take care of it? He can't, because he's looking at the full thing. It's depressing. Is it depressing looking at the world and how wicked it is and vile it is and how hungry it is for unrighteousness? It's depressing looking at the thousands that are people that have no regard for Jesus Christ, no love for the Bible. It's depressing looking at multitudes gathered together against the Word of God and against Jesus Christ. It's depressing. It's depressing looking at a big project and saying, how in the world am I going to get my backyard in order? How am I going to build the house? You never do everything just by looking at the whole thing. You do the thing by looking at the next step that's in front of you. And that's what Jesus Christ, it narrows it down to Andrew, because instead of looking at the whole of it, instead of looking at everything that has to be done and how impossible it is, Andrew narrows it down to one person, and Jesus Christ says that one person's what we need. Now bring him to me, and let's take the first step. The first step's coming to Jesus Christ and bring it to Jesus Christ. So Nathanael, you understand God used Philip to help start the church, which is impossible. Right? Can you imagine them looking forward 2,000 years ago? Can you imagine them looking forward to our time today and say, hey, you 12 men here are going to build a church that's going to be full of billions of people. That's going to be in 150 different nations on the world, and you're going to preach about Jesus Christ, and we're going to translate this into 2,000 different languages. Can you imagine Philip thinking about that? He'd be like, Lord, 200 penny worth of bread's not enough for that. So I think the point with this is Philip was one that would be getting overwhelmed by just the scope of everything. How do you get anything done? Well, is General Custard, is President Trump, are these men, is there anything really special about Elon Musk? The great sinners, I'm not saying anything special about them spiritually. But these are men that are rich and have gotten a lot done. Is there anything special about them, or are they but men, flesh and blood? They're just flesh and blood. All they did was they just took one step at a time, kind of followed through with an idea and a plan, and just took one step at a time. All they were is flesh and blood. There's nothing special about them. What was special about Alexander the Great? There's nothing special about Alexander the Great. Okay? There's nothing special about the great men of the world. They sleep. They eat, they get tired, they get hungry. Hey, Philip only could focus in on what the problem was and saw what was not sufficient. Well, if all you see is what is impossible, are you ever going to get anything done for the Lord? Are you ever going to get anything done for your house? Are you ever going to get done anything for your family? Are you ever going to get done anything for the Lord? Saying it's impossible. It's impossible for this church to ... We're finding the borderline here. It is impossible for this church to get 150 people within these walls. If you're thinking about the big group, but how about just one? There is a lad here. Right? We get down to one person, and we're able to take that to Jesus Christ, and look at what Jesus Christ was able to do. Fed 5,000. So he saw what wasn't there. He saw what couldn't be done. Let's turn over to John chapter 14. So don't get lost in the big scope, the big game, the big play. Instead, keep your eyes focused on, he lost sight of Jesus Christ. It's the same thing Peter did. He lost sight of Jesus Christ. I'm going a little bit out of order with this, but John chapter 14, here's an interesting one. Let not your heart be troubled. Ye believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know. All right, here's Thomas. We'll get to him eventually. He says, Lord, we know not whither thou goest. How can we know the way? And Jesus saith unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. That great phrase that we all know by heart wouldn't even be in the Bible unless Thomas asked a question. Because when we get to Thomas, what are the commentators going to say about him? Doubting Thomas. If ye had known me, ye should have known my Father also. And from henceforth ye know him and have seen him. And that's where Philip chimes in. Maybe to defend Thomas. Maybe they were good buddies. Maybe he thought Thomas got answered roughly, wrongly. Who knows? But here comes Philip. Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. So Jesus says, Thomas says, we don't know where you're going. How can we know the way that you're going? Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Philip says, oh, Lord, the Father. Right? If you had known me, you would have known my Father. Jesus said stuff about his Father all the time. He never isolated himself away from his Father. He was always talking about his Father. And so Philip says, Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. Now, what's he do? You think about these things, and you come to, maybe I'm wrong, maybe you're right when you start thinking about this stuff, but maybe Philip wanted to have a mountaintop experience, just like Peter did, and James did, and John did. Right? They all saw the Father. Except they didn't. They saw Jesus Christ. But maybe they wanted something like that. Maybe they wanted this thing where God would, because if Jesus did that, where he brought down Moses and Elias, and he brought them in person to talk with Peter, James, and John. They were there as testimonies, as witnesses, and they talked about the glory, which I thought, weren't they not allowed to talk about that till afterwards? Maybe that's a detail I'm forgetting. But if something like that happened, and they understood, maybe they understood that Philip here, he understood, hey, Jesus Christ can open heaven for us and show us the Father. And so he's like, God, give us that vision of heaven and show us the Father. So this is a little bit of a mark down on Philip, just something he doesn't understand. But Lord, show us the Father, and it sufficeth us. There's something going on here that I don't have the brain power to figure out, the depth of this thing, to look at it. Jesus rebuked him, says unto him, have I been so long with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that hath seen me hath seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, show us the Father? So Jesus is claiming to be the Father. He's saying, I am the Father. I and the Father are one. You want to see me, you're seeing the Father. You want to see the Father, you're going to see me. All that you'll see of the Father is Jesus Christ. Believest thou that not, that I am in the Father and the Father in me? So get that? Jesus is saying, the Father's in me, I am in the Father. If you see me, you've seen the Father. Now you get how that applies to the church too, doesn't it? Didn't we just look at this morning about how Jesus dwells in us and we dwell in him? And so if a person wants to see Jesus Christ walking on the earth, well, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? If you're looking at me, you're looking at Jesus Christ. Wow. Have you ever thought about that? Ye are the light of the world. I'm not a light, but Jesus Christ is. I'm not a light, but this Bible is. The difference being with Jesus Christ is he was perfect, and so if you're looking at Jesus Christ, you're seeing the Father, but when Jesus Christ saved you, you became his light, his voice, his tool and utensil on this earth. You are the body of Christ, are we not? This church is part of the body of Christ, is it not? And so when you're looking at the church, you're looking at the Father and you're looking at Jesus Christ. Saying this as a hypocrite, great care and great concern needs to be made about how your church and how your person is presented to the world, because you are showing the world the Father and you're showing the world Jesus Christ. When you see Jesus Christ, you see the Father. So in another sense here, Jesus is telling Philip that you have to live by faith and trust my word in this. Same with us. We have to live by faith and we have to trust his word. Reading this is all of the Father you're going to see this side of heaven. Fellowship with you is all of Jesus Christ that we're going to see this side of heaven. So this is Philip. There's one more thing to close out here with Philip, and the last time he's mentioned is in John chapter 12. John chapter 12. I mentioned how Philip is a Greek name. Maybe there was more to it than just him having a Greek name. But it's interesting that what happens here in John chapter 12 and verse 20, there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. So this is the last Passover, the last week of Christ's life. This is where he's about to be crucified, well, betrayed and tried and crucified. And here we are, there were some Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. So these are proselytes, or what do they call them, that they converted to Christian Judaism? Not proselytes, isn't that the word? And they're Greeks, so here they are. And so who do they come to? The same came, therefore, to Philip. Oh, why? Why did they come to Philip? I don't know. Maybe because of his name, maybe they heard there was a disciple named Philip, and so they said, oh, he's Greek, so they came to him. Maybe Philip had connections to Greek-speaking people, and maybe that's why they came to him. I don't know. But it is a bit of a coincidence, I think. But these Greeks come to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would see Jesus. And this is what happened with Philip the rest of his life. As one of the disciples, this is what he turned to be all about, is making people see Jesus. Philip cometh and telleth Andrew. Usually 2 people can do a lot better job than 1 at it. And again, Andrew and Philip tell Jesus. What did he do the rest of his life? Well, that's it right there. And we don't have any much more written about him, but we know he continues on into Acts chapter 1. He was part of the 12. He'll be one of the 12 that's, are they the 12 gates or the foundations? I don't remember. Of Revelation. Are they the gates or are they the foundation? I have to look that up and remind myself. And what did he do? Well, he went out preaching. And, history tells us that he was crucified and killed for Jesus Christ. So you can say what you want to bad about him, but history tells us he went down to the grave preaching, saying we would see Jesus, trying to show Jesus Christ to the world. And so that's Philip. He's had some good things, had some things maybe that are just, I wouldn't call him slow-witted like this other man said, but had some things he didn't quite understand, just like a lot of us don't. They don't say that about Peter, and Peter made some big mistakes, didn't he? But he gets his friend. He saw what was impossible. He didn't have the faith to live by sight, or to live by faith, not by sight. But ultimately, he made his life to be about showing Jesus Christ to those around him. So that's Philip for you. God, thank you for this man. And Lord, we would do well to be a lot like him. And Father, thank you for the lessons he can teach us in these short little verses that we have. And Father, thank you for this old King James Bible. And thank you for the truth that's in there. Lord, help us to be doers of the word and not hearers only. And God, to live a life of a Christian here for you, for your glory.